But I can go out there and sign $1 million contract tomorrow. It doesn't protect the Federation in any way, shape, or form.
It just gets you fired.
It just means I have personal liability if I do that. Well, you get the same protections with the board now, and you'll have the same protections with the board in the future. It doesn't change any of that. You don't have any protections by saying that the executive board has to report to the board of delegates now anyway. You may think you do, but you don't. So the only thing that you can do is at the end say, well, we disagree and we're going to hold you personally responsible. But you can do that anyway after these changes are made. So all of the arguments against this are really kind of illusory and just not well understood.
Sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the main thrust of this is to state legally the de facto situation and reduce the delegate's exposure to liability.
Correct. No. Yeah, no, I think it does. Because if we remove the delegates as corporate directors, then we will, in some small measure, because I think the liability exposure today is extremely small.
But I think this would be a great way to sell it on
I
the
think it's
floor.
unfair, yeah. That's fair. I think
What
it's
we're doing
unfair,
is
not
just
false.
illegal to de facto situation, simultaneously lessening the delegate's exposure to liability.
It certainly was,
This is a no-brainer.
Gerald, it was not the consideration of the GTF. It was not part of the discussion of the GTF as to legal liability.
I understand that. I'm just trying to phrase it in a way that is extremely palatable.
What exactly has the Board of Delegates given up if this is passed? Because people will want to hear that on the floor. I think the answer is basically nothing.
From my perspective, my intention was for it to be nothing. And I think we've largely done that. I mean, you can make some arguments in a couple of cases, but I don't know anything.
Could you elucidate on the cases where you think?
I'm gonna come back to that.
Yeah. Just one follow-up on me on that. I would suggest on the floor that we try to move this for consideration ahead of some of those things that we just spent an hour and a half debating, because they'll all be moot if this passes. So we will cut a lot of time out of the annual meeting if we'll do this first.
Some will, some won't. Mark, I think you were next.
What's the purpose of the board?
Of which board?
Good question.
No, I'm serious. We have an executive board and a board of delegates. The purpose of which?
Right. What's the purpose of the executive board?
Why don't we let our executive board president know in here? Ruth, why don't you expand on that?
Well, the purpose of the executive board, and you're sort of putting me on the spot here.
I'm
Hey,
sorry.
Ruth, you want me to?
Go ahead, Randy.
I'll take a shot since I'm leaving the board. I can be more truthful, perhaps. You know, the issue is that you have right now a board of delegates, which is acting as a board of directors. It meets once a year. And the problem and the reason that there's been a policy board and an executive board that followed it has been, how do you keep the trains running on time all the other 363 days of the year? So it takes on more of that kind of governance responsibility in ways that aren't as connected with a broad-based, almost legislative body. And so that's kind of the problem that you run yourself into, is it takes on that responsibility without necessarily formally having that responsibility in the corporate sense. You still have the liability even on the activities that the executive board is undertaking all the rest of the year. So that is a way of trying to deal with that problem. And I don't think when the executive board was trying to grapple with that, particularly as we talked to corporate counsel, that we were looking for some way to take over more power and things away from the board of delegates. And that's why I think this structure that Alan and others have worked out that aligns with what some other Illinois organizations do makes a lot of sense. And as one now who will just be a delegate, I'm perfectly comfortable that I think we as delegates still retain the authority to make changes to bylaws that will rein in the executive board if necessary.
And that's kind of the question that I was asking, because from what I'm reading, the Board of Delegates is still in charge.
Correct.
The Board of Delegates is still, and the Executive Board serves at the will of the delegates.
Well, no, that's not that's it.
Well, what does it mean that the delegates retain all power and all authority?
They actually,
On the bylaw.
Go ahead.
What this really means is that this is really a codification of what we've been doing for the last 30-plus years. The delegates define what the policies and structure of the USCF are, but they cannot run the USCF from a management perspective day in, day out, week in, week out. That's not their, they just can't do it. Number one, there's no realistic way to do it. Number two, you don't want to have 150 people deciding whether or not they should use number 2 pencils in the office. What this does is this says that under Illinois law, there is a specific requirement for a board of directors. The board of directors is the managing body for the organization. In other words, it is really where the management power lies. That's not necessarily where the policy-setting power has to lie. The Illinois Bar Association is a good example of one which has come up with a way to do it. The example I pointed out in the forums quite a few times is the NCAA. The NCAA, each division of the NCAA has an 18-member board of directors, but it also, every body who is a member of the NCAA has a delegate that goes to their annual convention in January. That's the people who write the bylaws. That's the people who decide what recruiting rules are. That's the people who, in effect, decide what the rules of the various sports are. In other words, they define the policy and structure of their organization, just as the delegates define the policy and structure of our organization. However, the board of directors is the people who have to make sure that those policies and structure work, that they function, that they deal with what happens when you have to run an organization 365 days a year and not just 2 days a year. Are there things that the delegates will probably not be able to do that they can do as we currently recognize the structure, with them being the board of directors? Well, probably yes. The one that comes to mind to me has to do with lawsuits, because it's pretty clear under Illinois law that the board of directors is the body that initiates lawsuits. However, I think you could probably place some restrictions and check with the lawyers on this as to, for example, the FIDE thing that's on the agenda. That might be a difficult thing to do. But let's face it, in the years that I've been involved with this organization, we haven't been involved in that many lawsuits on the sending end. We've been involved in more than a few on the receiving end. And that doesn't change that. But what it really means is that we have a compact group whose responsibility it is to manage the affairs of the corporation. They don't actually run the office. That's Bill Hall and his staff's job. But they manage they do the management. They tell Bill Hall, this is what you need to do. If there has to be changes to the budget, because you can pass a budget once a year in August, but God only knows what's going to happen in January. The stock market went down 500 some points yesterday. That's going to have an impact on our economy. Will that have an impact on our budget? I'm pretty doggone sure it will. What impact? Heaven knows. We can't say that whatever budget we pass on Saturday or Sunday is going, that's not a straitjacket on the organization. That's a guideline to the organization. Here's what we want you to try to do, but we recognize that life changes, and we have to have a body whose job it is to recognize those changes, to deal with those changes, to help the office deal with those changes. That's what our board of directors needs to be. That's not what the delegates are. The board of directors don't decide what the rules of chess are. The board of directors don't decide what time limits we run. The board of directors don't decide, all those things that are important to us as delegates. Their job is to make the office run 365 days a year, which is what we want them to do.
Okay, I have Gary, Myron, Winston, and now Gerald. So Gary,
Mike
I
said
mean, not
that,
Myron, Rachel.
Mike said that all very well, though not very succinctly.
I never say anything succinctly, you know that.
And I don't want to add on to it, and I won't talk long. I want to throw in, I want to always keep in the backs of minds, OMOV, the executive board does sit here, representing the members directly. I do want you to know, though, that I see myself foremost as a delegate every day, and I'm one of 500 delegates, 140, whatever we actually have at any given day. One of 140 on any given day who is available to Bill Hall in the office for whatever problems arise, and they do arise daily. I'm on the phone with Bill every week, and emails, every day with somebody, taking phone calls from Hal and everybody else on a daily basis. It's we're there as one of the delegates who is always available to the office to make decisions as problems come down the pipe. They do.
Rachel.
When I first read this motion, I had some questions about it. And I noticed, maybe we can clear some of this up, I noticed that most of the governance task force supports it, but I don't see Harold's name. Harold, can you now support this? If not, please share concerns with us. What are they?
All right, there were two main big reasons I had why I felt I couldn't support the proposal. The ISB wording solves one of them. In fact, I suggested that wording now. The other one is a tricky matter, and this has to do with the fact that the Illinois statutes.
And Ken, this is the answer to your question. So go ahead.
The Illinois nonprofit statutes have what I consider some very unusual wording about committees. And I'll read you the current parts. First of all, if it's a simple advisory committee, which covers most of our stuff, like bylaws, like audit, the board of directors may create and appoint persons to furnish an advisory body, which may or may not be directors as members, which may not act on behalf of the corporation, or bind it to any action, but may make recommendations to the board of directors and to the officers. Well, that's what our committees have done, and if the new structure is, they would also make recommendations to delegates. That's not the problem. But there are a few committees, LMA, most importantly, arguably, ethics and TDCC, which do make decisions. What the first section, Section A, says that you can provide for directors to create committees and appoint directors or such other persons. But it also says each committee shall have 2 or more directors. A majority of its membership shall be directors, and all committee members shall serve at the pleasure of the board. That is completely contrary to the way we have wanted LMA to run. It could be a problem for ethics and TDCC. Certainly, again, with the current structure, there is no problem. The delegates are not going to remove committees in the beginning. The pleasure of the board's not a problem. We have enough people in the current delegates that they will be a majority of the committees, and they have been. So that section is no problem. Can I finish that again? Well, as we currently exist. If we decrease the number of directors down to 7, that section is a huge problem. That would mean the LMA, unless it's completely restructured, and there could be a way to do that as a separate corporation, but that's why I see this as a 2-year process, not a 1-year process. And there are some other ideas about the LMA. And we have to think of the impact of these other committees where you may need a legal opinion. Is the fact that you can appeal decisions of ethics and TDCC, meaning we escape from these provisions? I don't know. I would want a very good legal opinion for a not-for-profit lawyer.
One thing
So
about
the way I see it, just to finish, is I'd like this workshop to get a proposal in as good as order of what we desire, and then try and find a sound legal opinion on some of these committee questions, and then perfect it next year. I think that would be a more reasonable course of action.
Gerald, you had your hand up next week. For Ken.
Absolutely.
I just heard for the first time something about it, that's they serve at the pleasure of the board. The delegate selected committees do not serve at the pleasure of the board. I just wonder if that's going to be a sticking point.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, what you have, it's
I've only a few more copies if anyone wants to see it here.
It really does. It really relates to what the committees can do. The board can create advisory committees, which we have now. I think the board can delegate.
The ethics was the issue.
You delegate to those committees certainly the how they're structured. Delegate in the bylaws. The bylaws can define how they're structured. Right now, from my perspective on ethics, if you look at our ethics process, the ethics committee can make a decision. That decision is appealable to the executive board. Who can initiate appeal of an ethics complaint to the executive board? Any member of the executive board acting on their own can initiate an appeal. The executive board can take up an appeal without any of the participants in the ethics complaint being a part of the appeal. So any ethics process today in our ethics rules, the EB can take it up on their own. That's what the structure y'all have. We all have. So I think it kind of resolves that point. It also comes all the way up to the delegates, which we have experienced recently in the Thunder Frolic.
Again, just to clarify, Alan and I see the issue a little bit differently.
That is fair.
In my mind, the question is, what does it mean binding? Because if nobody appeals the ethics committee decision, it's binding. And I don't know how a not-for-profit lawyer would view that in terms of the Illinois statutes. Similarly, TDCC rules on disputes. I'm not aware that the executive board can take up a complaint on its own. I think the loser has the right to appeal. How does that work? And of course, the biggest problem is LMA, because we structured it and we consciously set that up to be independent completely of the executive board. So that the executive board just can't spend everything in the LMA unchecked. And the LMA definitely doesn't work with this unless we do something about the LMA.
And Harold and I are in agreement of the problem with the LMA. We may differ on a couple of the other areas, but we are in real agreement on the LMA. There are a couple ways to skin that cat.
There probably are.
I don't think that's necessarily a deal killer because there are a lot of nonprofits that will have separate investment corporations. They're appointed by the members of the thing. I mean, I'm the auditor of the Kentucky Union of Constant Methodist Church. We have it there. We have it in a whole lot of stuff I know in our area. To put this back in order, Gerald, you can end up first. You first.
Well, I have 2 points. Number one, Article 5, Section 1 says the Board of Delegates is responsible for the management of the USCF. That's just plain wrong. It never has managed the organization. So that needs to be fixed. While this motion isn't perfect, especially with regard to the LMA, it's a darn sight better than what we've got now.
Mark.
Newcomer to the USCF relatively last 10 years. It's been described to me that this is a federation of state affiliates. Okay? This moves farther away from a federation of state affiliates more to one national governed organization.
Bill.
A couple of points. I mean, this that you handed out, Harold, I mean, it seems to me that this is directed specifically for bodies that are to act on behalf of the corporation, but also if this is to act on behalf of the Board of Delegates as defined in the bylaws, I don't see where you have any conflict. This would only pertain to a committee or subcommittee appointed by the board to act on behalf of the corporation, so I see no conflict there. The other point about the Federation of States, we've got a lot of problems there. Remember, state organizations have a certain membership. Not all of those members are USCF members, and not all USCF members in that state are members of the state organization. There is major inherent and problematic conflicts there.
So the
Okay.
origins of the organization
Mark.
are at fault.
Hold on a minute, Mark. Bill still has the floor.
Well, yeah.
And as chair of the meeting, I would like to point out that the delegates will still be appointed by the states, and the delegates will still retain the bylaws control. So we're still remaining in that federal viewpoint. I mean, think about how we do it nationally, right? Just think about the U.S. government. Well, not that it's the modicum of efficiency, but and there are parallels to the USCF that are out. However, we have representatives and senators who are elected by states, and we have an executive body who are elected by the people at large. And, you know, this is several kind of close to that. Gary, and then we had, okay,
It's
Gary and then Gerald.
11:09, and we've introduced a committee problem that we have not introduced a solution for. And I'm very concerned about that, since we're about to lose our time before we get on to the general meeting. I don't think that these committees, the LMA, Ethics, any other delegate-appointed committee, are sacrosanct. I realize that's going to rub some folks the wrong way, but that is not, that those should not be treated as bombs that are going to blow up bigger ideas here. So we have to deal with that. So I've yet to hear a solution with how we're going to deal with the LMA and other committees.
I'll take these two questions and then I'll address that. Yes, Joe.
The USCF, the original idea of the USCF was a federation of state affiliates, but that's not what it is anymore. Now it's a nonprofit Illinois corporation.
That's an
Please.
affiliate of
Luis.
I just have a couple of questions. Number one, if we pass this, can the delegates undo it? Can since they're not the board of directors, can they change who the board of directors are?
This is a definition in the bylaws. The delegates will retain the power, as they do in most organizations, to change the bylaws. So the answer to that question is yes.
And the second question is, does this affect the insurance in any form as the delegates being covered?
We still have in the provision the indemnification of not only directors but also delegates from the organization. The way that that works in most states, and it applies in Illinois as well, that if, and I'm very familiar with this because the Kentucky law is very much like Illinois law and had unfortunately occasion to deal with it, there are very clear indemnifications of volunteers. The indemnification is less clear, that the liability doesn't extend. As long as you're acting in accordance with what the organization says it's going to do, with its bylaws, then you're pretty much indemnified personally from a lot of liability.
Right. There's the Volunteer Protection Act, and
Right.
also if people are acting in the capacity that you have asked them to act on your behalf, you have to back them up. If you don't, then no one's going to work.
But the law provides a pretty clear, as long as you are acting in official capacity and in accordance with the bylaws of the organization, it provides pretty clear legal protection. Harry, I'm sorry, I'm back.
Come on, me? Okay.
Yes.
Harold, you handed out this statute regarding the board of directors creating committees. Does Illinois have any prohibition against whatever the Bar Association has, a House Assembly or something? Can they not also create committees?
I think they can, but my understanding is, when I've got the whole ISBA here with me as Alan, that none of their committees are binding in the way that some of our committees are. I think they're simply advisory, like most of our committees are, as well as bylaws and so forth, that there's not a problem.
To address that question, under Section 9, Article 3 of the Illinois State ISBA bylaws, as adopted June 18, 2011, no action or statement of committee or that of any officer or member thereof establishes a policy of this association unless it has first been approved by the Assembly or the Board of Governors. Translate that in our parlance, the Board of Delegates or the Executive. Yes.
Further on this point about the committee, I think that Harold, I respect Harold's opinion, but I don't think that this issue of a committee is really an issue. If we make the change that's being proposed, the Board of Delegates will be become essentially the assembly of the organization. Many organizations have assemblies. It's a very typical setup for nonprofit organizations. The Illinois statutes are silent on the authority and structure of assemblies. And also, they are silent on the committees that might be established by assemblies. Now, any body, including an assembly, can create committees. The authority of the committees derives from the authority of the body of which they are the committees. So the assembly that we create would be able to establish committees. At the moment, there are 4 committees that the bylaws create. Ethics, the LMA, bylaws, and the election committee. Those committees
And
can
the audit.
And the audit.
Yeah, they're fine.
Those committees can still be committees of the Board of Delegates and would have authority from the Board of Delegates to do whatever they did. The committees that are, the other committees are all committees already of the Board of Directors, of the Executive Board. Those would become, without any further changes, committees of the Board of Directors.
Let me address 2 issues there that may answer a couple of questions. One, the election committee under Illinois law retains a separate nest from the Board of Directors, like we have, like we retain. That's allowed. Second, you said something like not audit. The audit committee right now, of which I am the chair for another couple of days, is an advisory committee. So it's fine the way it is structured. It's an advisory committee. We don't hire anybody.
It's not quite true for one reason.
What's that?
Because of the relationship between the audit committee and the independent auditors of an organization under law.
The audit committee is established. We have the ability to contact the auditors, which we've done, but we don't hire them. They're hired by the directors.
More importantly,
and
the member has the right to contact the audit committee. And not any member has the right to contact the audit committee with regards to issues that need to pertain to the audit. And those must bypass the Board of Directors.
And presently they do, and they will still be a committee of the other, but they're not making policy, is the thing of what I'm trying to point out.
I agree with Val on that.
Beatrice.
Yeah, I hear a lot of questions. I think there are a lot of loose ends in this proposal and differences of opinion, and people are not certain about how things, maybe it's not a bad idea, but I think it should be investigated further and probably not considered table for next year.
Let me address one issue that is a loose end that's out there. When you're talking about LMA, I think Carol and I both agree that there are issues with the present LMA structure fitting in here, because the LMA clearly, full disclosure, of which I am a member as well right now, the LMA does in fact make investment decisions. And there is a wall, if you will, by design between the LMA and the executive board. Now, one way to retain that is simply to spin the LM off into a separate corporation, which is a member corporation of the USCF. It has one member, which would be the USCF itself, and then the USCF Assembly, Board of Delegates appoint the directors of that corporation. And then that corporation takes action, working in policy under the direction of the people who appoint it. Again, that's a fairly common structure that we have in my area. We do it all the time, and it's for that very reason. It also provides a wall of separation for legal protection of the assets that are in that in case somebody sues the main organization. You have a separate corporate structure that you have to pierce. I'm not so sure that isn't a bad idea. Anyway, you know, and I think it solves the problem of the LMA. I don't see the same issue that Harold sees in the ethics of the TDCC. I just simply don't, and I think that's an area of disagreement. Yes,
I'd like Leroy Dubeck. I'm a past president at USCF and vice chair of the LMA. And I think just a little history for somebody that may be new to this. At one time, the USCF had about $1.7 million in life member liquid assets. When Beatrice Marinello became president, that was down to zero. There had been no control on it. We had no choice. We had to get out of the book and equipment building. We sold our building in New York, and that is the funds that are presently the corpus of the LMA. At that point, we introduced this LMA committee because experience had shown what would happen if one committee had control of it. Various executive directors and elected leaderships went through the entire 1.7 million. Since then, we haven't. I mean, we have our own investment strategy, and you know, many of you know, not too many good things happened yesterday with the stock market. Okay? Fortunately, the LMA investments have only two things at risk. We loaned $100,000 to the USCF. Well, if they go broke, we go broke. And we have 1% of our money in stocks. The other 99% is in cash. So we survived relatively well the shall we say, unfortunate course of events over the past couple of months. But it's not small. I mean, this is the main protection. Having seen what happened under various executive directors, it wasn't one, and under various boards where they control it, I don't think that this is just a committee. I think it's potentially the survival of the USCF. So I think this is a huge issue. Now, whether your way of dealing with it, I haven't thought about that. But I would be dead opposed to any bylaws changes that put the appointment and that of the LMA in the hands of the executive board.
I don't think there's any part of the purpose of the GTF or the people who were involved with it that had that goal in mind. In fact, we, quite the contrary. I think we very explicitly retained in there, in the provision, it retains the right of the delegates in the bylaws to appoint the committees they do now. The problem becomes with the provision of Illinois law that says, can a committee take action on behalf of the corporation if it is not comprised of the majority of the directors? The way to solve that problem is spin the assets off into a separate corporation, which is a member corporation, with the sole member being the USCF, and let the USCF delegates appoint that board. You had your hand up.
Yeah.
And then Gerald will come back up.
Harold made a statement a while ago where he said he thinks this needs to be a multi-year process. I completely agree, if only because there are a lot of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed that we still don't quite know all the answers to. LMA is one, although I get the impression that there is a workable and probably improvement in the idea of a separate member corporation that holds those assets, which is not that different from what people have suggested in the past, something like a rabbi trust, although that's a little more extreme form of organization than I would prefer. The issues with regards to committees that can take action, TDCC I'm less worried about because that's not necessarily a member right. Tournament directors are a small subset of our members. I think that's probably workable. Ethics, I think that's probably, in my mind, the other major sticking point because ethics can recommend actions that affect the rights of a member of the organization. However, as I recall, before we had ethics, we suspended members for various reasons anyhow, and all those suspensions were handled by the board of directors. And I think an easy way to solve that would be to continue to have the delegates to appoint ethics, but to go back to the situation where the recommendations of the ethics committee must be voted on by the board of directors, whoever that group is. And I think the reason we didn't have them voted on by the board of directors before was because the board of directors was the delegates, and that was an unworkable solution. But I think if we go back to having the executive board be the board of directors, it is therefore reasonable and appropriate for them to be the final source to take actions upon the recommendations of the ethics committee. So I think that's solvable, and we can do the exact same thing with TDC if we need to. And that also is historically how it was handled. In the past, and I was one of those who was suspended as a TD. That suspension was by action of the executive board. So I think those are solvable problems, but they're not solvable by Sunday. I think what I would recommend is that we initiate, we basically say, yes, this is the direction we want to go. We don't have all the pieces quite worked out yet, but this is the direction we want to go. There is another issue of transition, and I was the one who basically wrote the transitions for the last reorganization. Harold and I wrote the transitions for the last reorganization of the structure, and I have concerns about that as well. The biggest sticking point I see on there are the delegates at large. Because you cannot, if somebody's a director of the corporation, you cannot take their term of office away from them. They can resign, but you can't take it away. So we have DALs who are elected for 3-year terms, so it's going to take us at least another 2 years to fix this thing completely in the first place, unless we can get all the DALs to voluntarily resign. Therefore, I think I would suggest that if we decide this is the direction we want to go, perhaps when we do the DAL elections on Saturday, Harold, perhaps we should only elect them to a 1-year term rather than a 3-year term, so we aren't compounding the problem.
So I would like to point out that when bylaws considered this, when bylaws considered the GTF provision, I don't remember what the numbers were, but oh yeah, you got them up. 9 of us considered that it was a 2-year process. 1 thought we'd do it in 1 year. 2 abstained, and 2 thought, we ought to see if folks just thought it was okay to do it in 1 year. And we did, okay. We did. We take the extra year to sort out the issue. I think the GTF was about split between a 1-year and 2-year process. I personally think it's a 2-year process. Or just, to hammer out issues like this, the transitional issues. But we want to float it and see, we've got to talk about it and see if that's the general sense. If it's not the general sense of how to take this organization, we stop. It's pretty simple. Otherwise, we get into some more of the details and fix all the plumbing. Yeah.
Yeah, one other.
I'm sorry, I had Mark.
Is part of the process then just to ask all the delegates, directors, to resign as directors?
No, we make their term right now ends at the end of December, okay? So we make that in what we pass. We make their transition date when it happens. Our issue, and their terms will end anyway, our issue becomes the problem of people whose terms won't end. That is an issue right now.
And I'm just trying to sort out what I've heard here. If they don't resign, their terms don't end?
We can change what we're doing there in the provision, but we cannot take away their term ends. If their term ends and we change the structure, their term ends. Our problem becomes if we do, because their replacement seat will then be approved and qualified. The problem is we have people whose terms will not end on a December 31, that will end the next December 31. And that's an issue that we need to resolve. Hold on just a minute, Mr. Dubeck. Gerald has his hand up first.
I see real danger in wanting things to be perfect before we do anything. One of my favorite quotes is Winston Churchill, who said, "Perfection is spelled P-A-R-A-L-Y-S-I-S."
Mr. Dubeck.
Yeah. Your idea, just thinking of it, of a separate corporation. One of the things the LMA did this year was to try to reduce the cost of what the USCF was paying for its bank. It has a $250,000 line of credit that's completely used. And they charge on unsecured, the part of it, something like 6.5%, something like that. I may be a little off. On a secured part, it's 2.25%. So we took $100,000 of our liquid cash, put it in a CD in that bank, and that reduced the rate for everything USCF owns, because we're part of the same corporation. Now, if you have 2 separate corporations, whether a bank will allow that by its rules. I'm just saying this is...
They will. I've been in that circumstance myself, and because it's a member organization and its member is the USCF, It's like a subsidiary. It just has a separate governance
Yeah,
structure.
continuing with the same thought.
Yes.
If it's a separate corporation,
Yes.
it will require an audit every year.
It would require what?
An audit.
It would be an affiliate. It would be included in the audit of the USCF because it's a member organization of the USCF. The USCF is the sole member. We're the owner. We are the owner. Yeah, I mean, but it's just included. It's a consolidated financial statement. That's the business I'm in. It's a consolidated financial statement because the body that has control over that organization, the subsidiary organization, is the board of delegates of this organization. Same people have control over this organization. Sir?
On the question of how the process would go, what I would like to see is at the meeting on Saturday, the board of delegates adopts this motion, but that the effective date be made at the end of the current terms of the delegates at large, which I believe would be not this year, but next year. Is that correct?
No.
No,
I was elected last year for a 3-year term. So my term of office as a delegate at large expired in 2014. Or 2013.
At the delegate.
2013.
At the delegate.
Well,
Point of information.
Go ahead.
Do we have an opinion on whether the DALs are even legal?
we got one way back when they were created, I think in 75, we were told there was no
I
option.
mean, more recently though, we've got.
In Indianapolis, you said they were okay, yes.
You know, you're referring-
We recently got something that says that the directors of a corporation must be elected by the members.
And Bill, as you know, I wrote the whole board, and I thought you were copied. I consider that a new opinion, I'm trying to think of the right word, not well thought out, researched. I'm being as polite as I can. I could say something else.
You're looking for the word crap.
I urge the deal. All right. And in part, the difference was that the former person, Carolyn Grossball, came to the meetings, clearly read the bylaws carefully, met with members of the bylaws committee, and I believe Harry Sabine at dinner, attended the bylaws workshop and the delegate meeting. I don't know what his involvement is, but I know I was never asked any questions.
I think where we're headed now is Harold will get the sense of the group as to what we think.
Yeah, I think it's important to make progress. I mean, I agree with Gerald in one respect. I don't want us to do nothing. If we like the idea, then we should. I'd like to take votes here on the subparts, get a consensus, maybe get straw votes of the delegates, and then have serious questions for the attorneys. One of the unresolved things Mike brought up, ethics. Well, what if the ethics complaint is against an executive board member? If you don't have an appeal of the assembly, that's a little awkward. I mean, there are things we need to think out. I, again, would like to get a respected lawyer's opinion on some of the points on the committee. We want to look at this LMA question because if we like this idea, and this may be the way to go. I mean, Alan told me about it, what, last night or something. I said, gee, I hadn't thought of that. But we need to make sure what the legal ramifications are and work out the wording. The problem with adopting something right now is it would put these committee questions and the LMA itself into jeopardy, and saying we're adopting it effective a year or two in the future doesn't really make sense. You want to get it to the point that everybody knows what it is when you're adopting it. Hopefully we can solve all these questions. You have some votes.
I would like to point out something that you just said that was an error,
Oh, okay.
Gerald. The provision that we have right now does not change the ability of a member to appeal an ethics decision
right
to the board of delegates. What we have presented does not change that, right?
So let's take a vote of this meeting on the substance of the things here and see if we have agreement. Okay, first question is, should the executive board be the board of directors? need any more discussion on that, or just vote?
Just vote.
All right, I'm going to abstain. All in favor, put your hands up. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 11 on this side.
16 on this.
Noes. 1. Abstentions.
3.
Oh, I'm sorry. There were 3 noes?
3 no.
4. Let's call that again. Noes.
Noes.
Noes. I went from 1 to 4. Now we're at 3.
Yeah, it's 3.
That's right.
We lost Roger.
Abstentions.
1, 3.
Oh,
And you.
4. Okay. The wording that Alan's proposing, that actually solves my problem about I have EB subject to the delegates, but in effect that continues the current system. And that's something I'm in favor of. Just raise your hand.
What's the
Wording of the ISBA thing, remember that sheet that everybody got?
That I just handed out that says that would amend the proposal that we have to say that Article 5, Section 1 would say the legislative governing body of the USCF shall be the Board of Delegates. Board of Delegates shall be the supreme authoritative body of this association, this federation, I should say, and shall determine the policies that shall govern the USCF in all of its activities. Among other things, it shall have the authority to amend the articles of the corporation, the bylaws, and the USCF official rules of chess, approve the annual budget and supervise the ethics and compliance process of the federation. And then, Article 6, Section 2, the executive board shall be the board of directors, which is the managing body of the USCF and is vested with full power to conduct all business of the federation subject to the laws of the state of Illinois, the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and the mandate for the delegates.
All those in favor of that wording? 1, 2, 14 here.
7.
Opposed? Abstain? 1, 2, 3. Wait, 2. Me, 17. This one. So you're back to 4? All right. But the delegates should keep their rules of authority.
You keep your what?
Rules of authority.
Rules of authority. Well, that was kind of just what was in
It was part of what?
Do it again. Should the delegates retain authority to amend and approve the rules?
1.
It's like a boatload.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 here.
There you go.
Rules.
Opposed? I get a 0. Abstain? 0. Should the delegates supervise ethics compliance? I think that's the way your proposal is written, which means you can't appeal.
And it currently provides for that. We've just retained it.
Right. In favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 13.
18.
No. Abstain. Somebody abstain.
Just got too damn tired.
All right, let's see. Delegates continue to elect committees, including bylaws, audit, elections, and LMA, which wouldn't preclude you voting for the separate corporation.
That's right.
All those in favor?
Again.
Right, now it's audit, bylaws, elections, and LMA.
Ethics.
No, I forgot it. Thank you.
It's the 5 they presently do.
All right.
Now it is.
Now it is. It's what we're.
Sorry, okay.
It's written that way.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 18, 32. Any noes? Abstentions? 1, 2, 3. to Article 9, Section 13, I think what happened is one of the word delegates might have been left out at one point, and we just needed to put it in. And Alan and I agree with bylaws. We will show of hands on that. Let's say aye. Okay.
The idea was that every article that presently just says delegate, just says director,
has to say director.
Needs to say director and delegates.
Right. Now, the next one, there may be some discussion on. One of the proposals, and it does make sense to me, the bylaws all in favor, was that the delegates no longer ratify the accountants. Because A, it comes very late anyway, and B, we haven't been doing it recently anyway. So why keep a provision that's not operative?
You appoint an audit committee. The audit committee makes a recommendation to who hires the accountant as the independent auditor. The independent auditor is independent. It has standards that it must get, firm, must follow, that are stipulated by its State Board of Accountancy and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, which I am a proud member for the last 29 years. And we're not doing it, and we meet after their report is done.
Right.
And we're not prepared to hire the one for the next year 3 weeks after their audit is finished. So how this worked last time, which we changed auditors year before last, the audit committee reviewed it, the audit committee did the RFP, the audit committee reviewed all the proposals, the audit committee made a recommendation to the board, who hired the people we recommended. And I don't know why we have a bylaws provision we don't do.
And by the way,
really
if we want this could go through immediately, of course.
Yeah.
This isn't tight. Roger.
Does the executive board take a specific action doing the same thing?
Yes,
They take a
hire.
action. They take a vote doing the same thing, or they just hire them?
They have to take
Hiring
a
is
vote.
different than approving.
They have to take a vote to hire them.
I'm
They
not
have
talking
to
about
take-
hiring. I'm talking about approving the report. We're talking about approving the report.
Oh, approving the report. Oh, okay, at the end. I'm sorry.
So do they do the same thing that you're talking about here?
The bylaws provision that we have does not require the delegates to approve the audit report.
They do.
We're not addressing that. The bylaws provision we have does not require the delegates to approve the audit report. The bylaws provision we have says the delegates would ratify the selection of the auditor. That's what it calls for. Yes, Richard?
That is typically the practice in almost every public corporation that I got a report from.
Because of the timing of the thing. We have our fiscal year end. Normally your corporate meeting is before. You do the corporate meeting in October, your fiscal year end is December, you hire the auditor, you get their audit report
That
next
would make
week.
sense, right?
So what section are we repealing?
Yeah.
Cut to the chase, you'd want to do this independent of the test of governance reform.
Yes.
And this is a completely independent issue.
Yes.
Yeah, we could get this through at this meeting. I mean, if we want.
So,
Right.
Where does the management letter go? I mean, in many audits I've seen, there's a separate management letter, not the part. And to whom does that presently go in the USCF?
The audit committee
And the board of directors.
and the board of directors. The audit committee and the executive board presently can receive the management letter. I'm not sure how diligent the audit committee has been in some past years about making sure they got a copy of it. I'll guarantee you this audit committee is getting the copy of it. This audit committee also had a discussion with the independent auditors prior to the audit about the possibilities and circumstances that would lead to fraud within the organization, which is required under audit standards that the auditor talk to the audit committee about such. And I knew that since that's what I do for a living, and I called them and said, you need to talk to me. I also got a draft as the chair of the audit committee, a draft of the audit report for discussion purposes at the same time that the office got it.
All right, somebody asked me where this provision of the bylaws is, and I think I found it. If you look at Article 9, Section 8, the last sentence, it says,
only 2 sentences.
which is the last sentence, the second sentence, that's right.
What page is it?
It's right, page 25.
very
The
fine.
choice of accountant shall be subject to ratification by the Board of Delegates. That's what we're talking about, correct?
Yes. And in fact, our article doesn't even call for an audit. The article that we have says that we will have them reviewed, believe it or not. Those are two different services.
All right, I think we're ready to vote. In favor of deleting that sentence from the bylaws, which is, again, Article 9, Section 8, 8, the second sentence.
I'll beg to differ with you a little bit. I don't think we want to delete the audit requirement. What we want to do is move.
It's just a sentence.
I just want to make it clear.
Right.
We're not saying we don't get an audit. We're saying that the delegates don't have to ratify the selection.
Right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 on this side.
16 on this.
That's 31. All those opposed, raise your hand. All those abstaining. Good, someone acknowledging abstention. Harold, that's on the next item.
No, a question on this item. You said that there's no requirement to audit, but there is a requirement to review. Is audit a higher standard?
Yes.
I thought so, thank you.
You want to, we could also move to change review to audit if you want to.
I'm fine with that. I mean, we're getting an audit now.
Right.
I think that's the intention of the bylaw provision. It's just not.
We can always do more than requirement.
That is correct.
Yeah.
All right, our current bylaws say that the delegates approve the sale of land in the building. I think both committees wanted to keep that provision.
And the current GTF proposals make no change in that provision at all.
If you agree with that, please raise your hands.
We're agreeing not to make it.
Yes. 14 here.
15 on this.
There's no one opposing.
I know.
Well, once you see, if you're considering making the executive board the board of directors, these issues naturally come up. You
Right.
have to have a consensus. I'm sorry.
Someone's going to ask tomorrow, and we can say we thought about it.
Yeah, no votes. Abstentions. 1, 2.
And we did consider this, by the way, both GTF.
All right, we're almost done. Next, we had 2-year process or 1 year. I think I know where we should be going. We've had discussion of it. Can we vote on this? All those in favor of 2 years, please raise your hand. 2 years or more. To finish this process we're talking about. 1, 2, so we get the legal opinions. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 on this side.
10 on this side.
All those in favor of 1 year, raise your hand. It's down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that right? 5 on your side. 1 year. Abstentions? 1, 2, 4.
We had another.
Harold,
we
had another decision.
Another abstention?
Question, just a question.
Oh, yes.
Not an extension.
Okay.
When did the clock start, or is the clock going to start? 2 years, 2-year process.
That means our goal is next year is to get this done.
So
next
we
year.
are finishing year number 1.
Yes.
Okay.
The idea would be to come back to next year's delegates meeting to propose changes and put an implementation date.
That's how I understood it, but the way it's stated, it could have started with
No,
delegates.
no, it's good to clarify. All right, should we consider having a separate corporation for LMA, which means if GTF stays, that and bylaws will work with some attorneys on figuring out how to do that. You want any discussion about it? You think we've had enough discussion?
It sounds to me, at least, since it protects the assets, it sounds to me like a good enough idea that we might want to introduce an ADM to do that, separate of GTF, separate of who the board of directors is, just as a good idea on its own.
Okay, and again, next year, if you've got the wording, you're right, maybe that should be a separate.
Not this year.
Or this year, if you get the right
No,
wording.
not this year.
Because we don't have the structure for it.
Yeah, to answer your question, guys, why not this year if you can get the right wording? Good point. I'm not sure we got time to get the right wording between 11:45 today and 9 o'clock in the morning.
I mean, if someone wants to, we could approve in principle seeking to do that, but I don't think you want to go further. All right, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. That might be a solution. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, 13 on this side. That's 51. No votes. Whoops, whoops, I'm sorry, no.
Yes.
Sorry.
Count before writing.
I tried. Okay, abstention.
Mr. Winston, point of clarification.
What? Yes?
When you announced the numbers on your side, I'm seeing hands drop on this side while he's still counting.
I've had them at that point. I'm starting from the back. Coming forward.
Yeah, he's counting back to front.
Well,
I'm getting them. I'm confident I'm getting them.
Now, I don't know if we can do anything on transition. My point of the problem, it did occur to me, and maybe I'm an optimist, that couldn't delegates voluntarily agree that their term should end earlier. And we'd like a legal opinion on that.
Yeah, each individual GAL would have to agree with.
We have about, what? We have 11. Some of whom were here at the meeting. Well, we signed,
and we have a few that could be.
I'm giving alternative wording, agree that that term would end earlier.
Can I make a point on that? Illinois law allows you to write a letter and set a date for terms of resignation. So it would be as simple as, if this passes, I therefore, resign effective, December 3rd,
And honestly, I think you could resign as a director and not resign as a delegate, because those two functions will be separate.
Not the way the bylaws are currently worded.
Well, all right, this is something I think we have to think about. I don't know if, and let's look at the wording right now. What are you looking at? The delegated large wording?
Mike isn't looking at it.
I think you.
I'm not looking at anything, I'm just pointing out that.
I think you could also just, and the lawyers will correct me if this is wrong, but you could also simply have them, since there'll be directors and delegates, and those will be different roles, the delegates at large who might have a claim to might be aggrieved in some way, could simply write a letter waiving their right to be.
Well, that was
Right, that's exactly what we
board
were
of
saying.
directors.
That's exactly what we were saying.
All right, I think we probably need to think about how to do this. Since I probably have a motion on the floor, I solicit suggestions how we should word the motion this year. Because the bylaw does say a 3-year term. So.
No, it actually specifies their term shall commence at the annual meeting in which they achieve delegate at large status, which for you, Mike, was last year.
Yeah.
Okay, and will continue for 3 more annual meetings, so you're through 2013.
That's what I said.
Okay, so it's a 4-meeting term.
No, 2.
4
And
meetings.
potentially 4 if you're not a DAL at the start of the meeting. If you're a DAL whose term expired to that meeting, you're re-elected just so that there's no lapse.
But there is a point here. They're being elected as delegates. If you separate the director function, again, we might need a legal opinion on that. Might be able to have.
We have to change the bylaws to say the delegates may be directors of the corporation. And that we're going to need legal opinion on that because that's going to get out.
Mike? Yeah, Alan, you suggested earlier we might want to elect the DALs to a shorter term this year.
I think Harold suggested.
Yeah, I don't think.
I did.
I don't think we have that option. The bylaw specifically says 3 years. I'm going to suggest that we not elect any DALs this year.
Well, we have one person in the room who would be aggrieved by that.
But we have a provision of.
Not currently a DAL, but eligible to be one.
May I finish, please, Mr. Mullin?
Yeah, let Mike finish.
We do have a provision of selecting 5 people in the general membership meeting, so we can make sure that we do not aggrieve any such people. We also might want to consider putting in the option to, in our bylaws, to expand that 5 to be.
No, we can't.
Next,
We can't.
no,
We can't.
to
They're
next.
on my law.
Oh, that's right. That's a good point.
That's a no-go.
Right.
All right, let's think about this. Ken?
Wouldn't it be possible to introduce a motion to shorten the term for delegates at large before voting on delegates at large?
When do we vote on delegates at large?
That's what I'm saying.
First item in the agenda, roughly.
It could be, well, yeah.
But the agenda can be modified by
Yeah.
two-thirds vote.
Well, all right, they're very tricky things, but then the one person we've named, and there might be others, don't get to vote if they're here on the earlier items. Let me think about this. It might be also possible to get letters from the DALs here agreeing that their term would end, their term as director would end at an earlier date. And then
Subject to passage of that provision.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, right now, you're not going to have this whole thing actually functioning until 2 years from now. Am I not correct?
Well, if we pass it
Even if you pass
next
it next
year,
year,
it would be effective maybe January 1st after that.
2013.
Yeah, I think you're facing 2013. I don't think you can get there any sooner with it.
Yes,
Unless people resign.
But the problem is, if we elect you to a 3-year term tomorrow, which I'd be perfectly happy to do, because you're entitled, then that really postpones us out to 2014.
Well, when does your term expire?
Why don't we simple? Part of getting your duck, part of the process of the next year of getting all the ducks in a row ought to be to collect those letters prospectively, so you have them in hand.
Right.
And say we can do it if we get it passed.
I mean, one thing, Harold, would be simply elect me to 2013, whatever Nolan has, and then we're in the same boat. Okay,
We
can
have
go
to
other
change
people.
the bylaws.
The bylaws say you get a 3-year term, though.
No, it's easier.
I'm already.
Within, at the end of the delegates meeting in 2013, if we pass next year, we would like the term to end on December 31st.
I would be happy to sign a letter of that.
Well,
Specific.
Yeah.
and
Right.
he'll write the letter.
That is his term as a director.
Yes.
You might get a legal opinion saying you could resign as a director and still be on as a delegate, but I don't know.
Same as-
Yes,
Roger.
We've already got a-
One thing you haven't mentioned
Harold, there's a simple solution for this.
Task force.
Excuse me, we have somebody else.
is whether or not you consider what effects all of your actions and recommendations would have upon the Federation's effort to obtain 501c3 status. We talked about putting a wall between the two and the LMA law. I've heard no discussion, or you didn't even mention anything about any effects, if any, these things would have on the Federation's effort.
It would have no effects because you've got, I've got structures like that right now, it's clients. In fact, two that I'm the director of.
Did you discuss it with an item? I'm not certain it wouldn't have any effect.
Might actually make it easier.
It might make it more difficult, might be easier, difficult, I don't know.
I don't think that'd make it more difficult.
What drives the IRS process basically is your mission and purpose, more than anything else. Now, what will also drive it is, if you may have a charitable mission and purpose, but you're a single person organization.
That's an important initiative of the Federation.
I agree.
It looks to me like it ought to be an item that should not be ignored.
Well, again, if we're
I understand the concern.
I don't think it was ever something appropriate that we have to apply for it.
No, because it's a subsidiary, it's really what it is. It's part of the same entity. It wouldn't even file a separate return because a single member doesn't file any separate return.
Right, Leroy wanted to be right.
Yeah, well, I'm saying it's very simple. Right now, you have Nolan and others
Right.
whose terms go to to August 31, 2013. You appoint me to 3-year, and I'll give you a letter of resignation effective August 31, 2013 immediately. I'm then in the same boat with everyone else.
Well,
And then what we
Well,
do
we
is
could
a
do that
group.
with anybody elected here.
Right.
That might be okay.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that takes care of it.
Yeah, that might be
Then
the
we
easiest
simply have
solution.
people in the same boat.
I think that if we pass GTF next year, we would like the terms of the directors, the former directors, to expire on December 31st, 2012.
But we can't compel.
As direct, well, he
That's
can
what I
work his
said.
right.
We can't compel anybody to do that,
We
though.
would ask, that's all.
Yeah.
But we gotta-
You could give us a
we gotta
letter.
hear the way.
And you could say director, and if I have to resign this process.
Your choice.
If you want to. Yeah, you have the same purpose. Might be, we elect you last year. All right, I think Leroy's suggestion will work, and we'll try and do that anybody here, in fact, I'll have to talk to them, is Randy here? Randy Huff?
He was.
Yes.
That's another one. I would think they would be cooperative.
Byron is one. You're one.
Yeah, but I don't expire till next year.
If not, we'll start a recall campaign.
You can only recall officers.
Don't forget about the 5 that are elected membership meeting that get a 1-year term.
That's just a 1-year term.
Yeah, they won't be a problem.
But they carry over past December, they carry over to the next meeting.
We deal with that next year.
Problem is next year's election. Yes,
But you know, you have a point. We might want to have to do something this year.
Because it would be elected.
For next year, right, that's a good point.
That would point, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a few things to work on.
I knew where you were coming from.
Yeah, no, that's good, Ken. And Ken is a member of the committee. You can work on wording for that.
No good deed goes unpunished.
No, I think this was very constructive. I mean, it's really important to discuss these things before we get to the floor. While the floor may feel differently from us, usually this is a pretty representative group. And the history has been usually, if a workshop's pretty heavy, the floor will go along, because a lot of us are going to be there on the floor.
I would like, as we're ready to close, to really just say thank you to this group of folks. And it includes, in addition to the folks that are listed under ADM 1122, which is Guy Hoffman, Richard Kepke, Myron Lieberman, Savon Maradian, Gary Walters, Bill Goichberg, Ruth Harry, Brian Mottershead, include Harold Winston and David Quinn as well. And these folks put some time into this and put some thought into it, and I think did a really good job of working together and stepping into the process in the middle as a chair. I really appreciated you all's help and you all's willingness to work with me, and I just want to say that publicly. Yes, sir.
And I want to say, I thank all of us who served on GTF. Oh, Alan, a vote of thanks. He stepped in difficult circumstances. He kept the committee moving. He actually got a proposal on the delegates' agenda when it looked very difficult to do. So I think we should get Alan a round of applause.
Let's put him on the executive board.
Anyway.
You notice I agreed to become the chair on April the 17th. There was a reason for that in my will.
This will be the last applause you get.
Next is throwing pins and larger objects.
These bylaws changes that we just voted on, they will come into effect January 1st of next year or the following year?
What we have decided to do, with one exception, which will be we'll bring the audit issue up.
Right.
Is we'll present this tomorrow for discussion among the delegates with the idea to send it back to bylaws to work out these other issues, but present the sense and get a vote on the sense of the motion among the delegates, and then we'll send it back to work out, hammer out the details. We haven't passed it. And the
Wait, so we're going to leave the current completely unworkable structure in place for another year.
We basically have to have
It's not completely unworkable. It's just something that's
Burdensome.
Folks, thank you very much.
We are not yet ready to abandon the frying pan. But the motion says
amend the bylaws. They don't say to amend the bylaws next year or an advisory vote.
Gerald,
on amending the bylaws.
you're exactly right. And what I'm saying is, we will put that on the floor tomorrow.
Okay.
What is going to happen, I am certain, is that the delegates are going to vote to send that back to committee. I'm 100% certain that's what's going to
always
happen.
the microphone to refer to bylaws of GTF.
Yeah, I'm certain that's going to happen.
And if we weren't certain that was going to happen, the votes would have been very different.
Yeah.
But the motion is going to be what it says. And it's going to get amended to what we put the amendments on. And then it's going to get discussed, and it'll probably.
Along those mind, let me suggest that some of the things that were completely independent should be presented separately and first.
Okay. We'll split the motion to pull that, because one of them, the audit thing is equal. And I'll split that, or someone will split that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good job.
Well, I have this conversation, but you don't have time.